Hello, everyone! Welcome back to episode 3 of my Session Storytime series, featuring my brand new microphone. Be sure to let me know how it sounds in the comments, because I, personally, really like it. Plus, it's pink! Yay! Last episode, we left off in hot pursuit of our first real villain, only to find ourselves framed as the culprits of the king's assassination, and then captured by the royal guard due to my own shortcomings. So, obviously, we ended up in jail. That much wasn't a surprise to any of us, but what was a surprise to us was, how easy it was to get out. Yeah, we kind of had a whole jailbreak moment. I don't remember much of this part, but what I do remember is that we found a way to slip out of our cell unnoticed, and with our newfound freedom, we stealthed our way around the place, which I can only presume to be the castle dungeons. We didn't find much of interest, nor did we find an exit, but we did find Merlin. One of the doors we opened led to Merlin. In retrospect, he looked just about as confused as we did, but we were greeted by his usual catchphrase anyways. We quickly saw ourselves out. And then the guards saw us back to our cell. Yeah, we got captured again, and again, in retrospect, we were very lucky to have not been executed on the spot for our little escapade stunt, because as we found out, this strange plane was not particularly afraid of getting their hands dirty. This was a shock to me for multiple reasons, like many things in this weird new world. To make my confusion make sense, though, a little bit of context is necessary. You see, back at home, executions, or really even killing another person at all, is just about completely unheard of, save for the rare individual with something fundamentally wrong with their moral compass. This is for multiple reasons, but the biggest one being, they almost always come back. And when someone you killed comes back, you best believe they're gonna kick your ass in return, and so will their family, and then your family is likely to get in on it, and with how big our families are, before you know it, you'll have entire towns plotting each other's demise. This is all because, in my culture, your first death is not really a death at all. Not usually, anyways. We have powerful individuals in charge of each person's metamorphosis, their transition from mortal childhood to undead adulthood. We call them ferrymen. This plane calls them necromancers. So, killing someone on my plane is rather ineffective unless you manage to destroy their soul as well, which is rather hard for the average person to do. No matter how much you destroy the body, if there's even a tiny piece left, a ferryman can find the soul and bind it to a new form, even if it's not their old one. All you really accomplish is ending their childhood early, which is just cruel and unnecessary and doesn't really solve whatever problem you were going to solve by killing them. So, when I was told we were being taken to trial to see if we were to be executed or not, and seeing as I hadn't seen a single ferryman since I'd gotten here, I was oblivious to the culture differences at this time, mind you, I heard one thing. Killing children! I was mortified. We were taken into a trial room of sorts with a council of people that would decide our fate, as well as some sort of magic item that would notify them whenever we told anything but the truth. So, we did tell the truth, and they really had no choice but to believe us. We were trying to save the king, and the masked man, Tiffany, wasn't an accomplice of ours by any means. Despite the lie detector not going off, the entire room was still filled with tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. It was obvious that they still didn't believe that we weren't involved in any way. We may have been telling the truth about this, but what else could we be hiding? But then, something very unexpected happened. Someone came forward and vouched for us, and it was none other than the captain of the Royal Guard himself, who we came to know as Sir Frederick. He'd been right beside King Norval at the time of the crime, and saw our desperate attempt to warn him. It was only due to the chaos and grief of losing such a good friend that he'd neglected to control his guard. With such a powerful and influential individual on our side, the council really had no choice but to dismiss us, and we were freed despite their distrust of us. As we were escorted out, we heard Sir Frederick ordering the execution of some prisoners in our stead, something about saving face in front of the people. Even now, I remember that feeling of dread, knowing that it could have very easily been me getting executed, and I would have had no way of coming back. Yikes! Anyways, after our short incarceration vacation, we were now free folks again, with nothing to do and nowhere to go. Except there was still a killer on the loose, and we would not stand for that. Hero complex moment number 5, I think. I gotta get a counter in here or something. Here, let me just... There we go. So anyways, we decide that even though it's 100% none of our business, we're gonna find that killer and put him behind bars like he deserves. Although at this point, I'm a little apprehensive since the likelihood of him getting executed is high, and I'm not quite certain I want to be involved in yet another person's true death. Nevertheless, apprehensive or not, we decide the best place to look would be the black market, since that's exactly the kind of shady place a shady guy would hang out. Or at the very least, someone might know where he went if we give them a good enough incentive to tell us. So, back to the black market we head, and we find ourselves strolling much more leisurely through stalls, actually taking the time to look around and assess the place. Despite nearly every item being of questionable origin, we actually found some pretty cool stuff there. I was fascinated that there was an entire stall dedicated to selling body parts, and even more fascinated by another stall's set of mystery potions that I actually ended up buying. I had no idea what any of them did, but I figured they might come in handy in a dire situation. Sylvaeus, though, was intrigued by something else. He'd found himself a rather beautiful dagger, and I recall him standing there, contemplating it deeply for a couple of minutes as he turned it over in his hands. And then he pressed the flat sides really hard between his hands? Like, really, really hard. I had no idea what possessed him in that moment, but he was putting some serious work into this task, like breaking a sweat level of effort. In that moment, something in the air shifted, and after much effort, nothing happened. I asked Syl what in the world he was doing, and as it turns out, he'd remembered that diamonds are made when some things are put under a lot of pressure, and he wondered how much pressure it took to turn a dagger into a diamond. Yep, okay, so anyways, moving right along with our lives, we kept up the search, eventually coming across a bar of sorts with all sorts of suspicious individuals in it. There wasn't a single person in there that didn't seem like they could be in cahoots with our target, but there was one that stood out in particular. Someone tall, someone brooding, leaned in a corner with a drink in hand. Fully red eyes, not quite glowing, but sharp and narrowed. I didn't yet know how unusual it was to see a drow, but her demeanor struck me as unusual anyways. Unusual and familiar. Of course, I approached her in much the same fashion that I approached Tiffany, though she was somehow even harder of a nut to crack. It hadn't even occurred to me at the time that my chipper demeanor could be seen as suspicious in a place like this, but I pestered her the only way I knew how and asked her name. Tiffany. I knew it. I just knew my hunch was correct, and of course, maybe I could be wrong, and it was a total coincidence that our killer's true name was the same as this woman's likely fake name, but my gut feeling told me I'd found someone who would know the true Tiffany's whereabouts. I didn't actually know what to do with this information quite yet, as I felt like just straight up asking her where he was would definitely not work. So I kept her in mind, but decided we ought to head back to the tavern to regroup and make a game plan. So we exited the bar, and then exited the black market. What we walked into was complete and utter chaos. People were running through the streets for their lives from monsters I had never seen before and I didn't know yet how to identify. But this was far from the strangest sight. People running around with feathers sprouting from their faces, humans with their skins turned the strangest shade of bright blue, potted plants littering the streets that hadn't been there last we saw. A storm was brewing, marked by a thick cover of crimson clouds rolling in to block out the sun. At a loss for what to do, we naturally ran to find the only person we could think of that might be familiar with this sort of thing, Merlin. With the random appearance of him in the castle dungeons, we figured he might either have something to do with this or know how to stop it. We did manage to find him, and despite being in the process of quickly packing everything away and making to get the hell out of Dodge, he relayed to us some crucial information. According to Merlin, there were two minor chaos deities that occasionally frequented this plane of existence, and the state of the town looked to be the handiwork of the most notorious one, Timi. She was a fickle goddess that adhered to no moral code, abided by no laws, and let no boundaries stand in her way as she followed whatever whim possessed her. We were all at a loss for why she'd suddenly strike. Why here? Why now? The only thing that could have summoned her was an act of pure chaos, an act so random that it called out to her in the void, leading her straight to... Oh. Right. Sylvaeus. So, okay, Syl accidentally summoned a chaos god, no biggie, that's fine. What do we do about it? Merlin informed us that there was a rival goddess, Kiba, a goddess of vengeance and order, the perfect counter to a chaos goddess. The only problem is she's been dormant for, well, as long as anyone can really remember. Her once expansive domain had been mostly taken over by a younger god, Lux, who not only took on the role of god of law and order right from under Kiba's nose, but was also the sun god, which is arguably a much bigger and more concrete role than vengeance and order. But dormant and weakened or not, she was our only shot, so we asked Merlin where we could find her, and he was kind enough to lead us there himself. You see, long ago there had been an entire church of Kiba, though in modern times it lay in ruin, deep within the catacombs underneath a convenience store. That really put into perspective how much modern-day folks cared about their old goddess. So we headed down into the basement, finding a secret door within one of the walls, and lo and behold, there was the church, dilapidated and dusty as all hell, but intact enough for our purposes. I truthfully had no idea what to do. I'd never been in a church and never tried to contact a god, mostly because I'd never heard of one before. It was, like many things, a completely foreign concept to me. But with the aid of Merlin and Syl, we finally settled on a plan and did some sort of ritual, a prayer, that would supposedly send her a message. And much to our surprise, it worked. The chaos had disturbed her from her slumber already, and our desperate pleas were just enough to convince her to pull her dusty old divine soul together for long enough to see what was going on. She appeared before us, though she was far from radiant or glorious. There was barely any spark to her anymore. She almost appeared mortal, and an old, sickly mortal at that. Regardless, she agreed to lend us her aid in putting an end to Timi's chaos, and bestowed upon us the Cross of Kiba, a powerful holy symbol that would shift into what the holder most needed at the time. With this powerful tool, we asked Merlin where we could find Timi, and with his aid, we finally set our sights on her most likely location, the hidden church of the Cult of Chaos. And that's all for this time. It's crazy how one random spur-of-the-moment impulse from a player can change the course of the game forever, and we definitely saw that in this episode. Make sure to tune in next time. At this point, we were only about level 3 or 4, so stick around to see how we held up against a literal god at such low levels. If you enjoyed this session's story time and want to see where it goes from here, please subscribe, drop a like, and comment if there's anything you particularly liked or would love to see. As always, if you have any feedback or constructive criticism, I am all ears. Remember to take care of yourselves, everyone. Have a great day, and I can't wait to see you all next time.